Hey guys, it's Ross over at the Daily Jaws. I hope you're well. This month, February 2024, is a very, very special occasion in the history of Jaws. It's the 50th anniversary since the release of Peter Benchley's novel. Joining me today to commemorate this very special occasion is Peter's wife, Wendy Benchley. Today, we talk to Wendy about sharks, Jaws, the movie, the book, and so much more. Please join us for this fantastic conversation. I hope you enjoy it. And just to let you know, my microphone did slightly malfunction. So luckily for us, though, Wendy does most of the talking. Enjoy.
Oh, Russ, thank you so much. It's just hard for me to believe that it was 50 years ago that this book was published. And it was probably 50, I don't know, 2 years ago when he first suggested the idea to me. And I said, honey, I just don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that's going to sell anything. So it's been a long and wonderful journey since then.
I was going to say that you've preempted my first question, perfectly, because the first thing I was going to ask is, can you believe it's 50 years since the book was made? But I think you've touched on something there really important, which was going to be my next question, which was beyond the 50 years that we all kind of know as soon as the book was released. Obviously, there was a period of creativity in the run up to the book being written, being thought about, being planned. What was it like being around Peter in that sort of creative period? Obviously, you said that you weren't sure about the idea, but casting your mind back, what was that like being around Peter and the development of the book?
Oh, well, of course, he was writing speeches for President Johnson. And then when Johnson decided not to run again, Peter decided to freelance. And we ended up in a little house in Pennington, New Jersey. And he was doing freelance articles for magazines and honestly not making enough money to support me and two children. And I did not have a job at that moment. So he had a couple ideas in his back pocket for a novel, and one was about a great white shark that stayed around a community in the Northeast, and the other was about pirates. He figured everybody was interested in sharks and pirates, and maybe one of them would work. And so it was the great white shark one that was most interesting to people. And that's when I said, oh gosh, Peter, I just don't think it's that great an idea. So it was fun. But he wrote this book in the Pennington Furnace Supply House because I was at home with two toddlers who were very rambunctious, and he had been a reporter for Newsweek for years. So he was used to a lot of clank, clank, clank of old-fashioned typewriters in those days. So being in the furnace repair house shop was much better for him, much calmer than hearing children screaming and with their demands. So I think it's quite funny that that's where the book was written. But when you ask about his creativity, I mean, he wrote wonderful short stories when he was at Harvard. He was always writing and really enjoyed it. And his dad did a very interesting gift for him, I would say. His dad said, all right, you want to be a writer. His dad was a writer. His grandfather was a writer. And his dad said, if you want to write, you just can't afford to have writer's block. So this summer, when we're up in Nantucket, instead of mowing lawns, I will give you what you would have earned mowing lawns, which was not much. If you get up every morning at 7 o'clock and go out to their little studio and write. You've got to write, I don't know how many words, but it was quite a few words every single morning for 4 hours. And then you have to hand it in to me. I'm not even going to read it. You just got to get easy with sitting down and making those words come out. So Peter was always very disciplined that way. He had a beautiful creative mind. He loved plot and characters, and he would get the plot pretty well figured out in his head before he would sit down and start typing.
Mm. Because I think one of the things that you've highlighted there is one, obviously the creativity of just a writer or any kind of artist, and it is just a matter of keeping going and pushing your creativity
Yeah,
in any way that you can.
yeah,
But one of the things that I actually really enjoy about the book is the plot, and there's a lot of subplots there. Because obviously, when you look at Jaws, say from the outside in, it's a really tricky idea to try and build something around about a shark visiting a place and not leaving and causing a problem. It's like where do you go with that idea? And I think Peter did a fantastic job of finding three or four key characters, three or four different strands of plot that all kind of come together and ultimately resolve in the shark being uh, ended. Should we say? I don't want to give away the plot for people that haven't read the book, but there's a lot more subplot and subtext to the book in terms of the movie, which is a very very different take. But
mm,
obviously, you felt at the time that it wasn't a winning idea. So, did you get a chance to see snippets of the book? Would Peter sort of ask you questions about, or what do you think about that? Or did you see little sort of snippets of chapters? Or were you just like, I'll take care of the kids, you take care of the book, and I'll see you at the
yeah.
finish line?
Yeah, he every once in a while would show me different sections. And of course, once I saw how he developed the characters and what good writing he had, I thought Peter can make almost anything really fascinating. And the book, you know, he spent many, many summers in Nantucket. And he did go fishing with his dad, and so often sharks would come up and take the fish before they could even get it into the boat. So he had a lot of experience on the ocean fishing, and and he knew from Nantucket that this island depended upon the 3 or 4 months of summer to make all their money to last through winter. And so he had seen with his parents how hard people worked, how important it was, and he understood the small town life um, of of that kind of situation. So really, I think that the shark was there as an outside menace, but it was the people and how they approached that menace that gave the book its real depth of character.
Yeah. And I totally agree. I think Jaws, whether it's the book or the movie, is one of the most deceptive marketing campaigns you've probably ever seen because the shark is on screen for 4 minutes in the movie, and it's not really a huge part of the book. As you say, it's all about the impact that the shark has on these characters and the different places that it pushes them and the plots and things that it uncovers about the characters. And that's why people keep coming back to Jaws, whether it's the book or the movie. So yeah, I totally get it. Um, now, from what I understand, there was a gentleman called Tom Condon from Doubleday Publishing. He was the senior editor, and Doubleday was the publishing house that sort of ended up running with Jaws during its first edition. What was it like when you got that the news that the book was going to be published and things were going to happen? What was life like in the Benchley household at that moment?
Well, I honestly cried. I thought my life was ruined. I did. I I thought, oh, I mean, I just loved my life in Pennington with Peter and the two kids, and I was in the League of Women Voters, and I felt that it was just wonderful if we could just keep going. And I had seen, and so had Peter, other people who had basically been spoiled or their life ruined by too much notoriety.
Mm.
And so I was hesitant about that. I didn't really want to get into that world. Um, and Peter, of course, well, overall, we were absolutely thrilled. I mean, once I got over my trauma of, oh my gosh, our life is going to change, we were just thrilled. And and how exciting to be our age with two kids to love the ocean. To we grew up around the ocean, and as Peter often said, it's not often that a novelist can write a book, a novel, and then it takes him into a different world. So that book enabled us to go out on expeditions with the National Geographic and the American Sportsman and see with our own eyes what was happening on the ocean. And that was in the 70s and 80s when we really had not done that much research, real scientific research on what was happening to sharks and the ocean itself. So we very quickly saw that there was a lot of shark finning going on, there was a lot of pollution, and that was, as you all know, in the 80s and 90s, that was when people began to realize, "Oh, we have got to take better care of the ocean, of our planet." And, so lucky us, that was the end one of the end results. But the immediate thing when they called was, of course, great, great excitement for us and our families. And then when the movie came out, when David Brown and Richard Zanuck, and Peter got Steven Spielberg to do the movie,
Mm.
we just, had another wonderful, wonderful months, being somewhat involved in the movie and meeting all these fabulous actors, who made the movie.
Yeah, that was the thing. I mean, you don't get many books that have a movie as big
Yeah.
as Jaws, and obviously, even though Jaws was a massive movie at the time, and it still is. I mean, my mum literally just sent me something in the post. It was a 100 top films you must see before you die, and Jaws was number five.
Oh,
Do
you're right.
you know, what I mean, it's just like it should be number one, whoever wrote that, but it was number five, which is good enough. And I think it came behind The Godfather and The Wizard of Oz and a couple of other
Yeah.
classics, so held in very high esteem. But again, we don't get Jaws the movie without Jaws book. When the book came out, what was your sort of initial reaction to the publication, the excitement, the attention? What was that like?
Yeah. So well, it was very, confusing, I would say. Some of the attention for Peter and me personally was a little bit off-putting. I mean, when suddenly you're in the news, people talk to you differently. They I was the League of Women Voters, and I always used to have really good, strong arguments about public policy issues and what we should be doing about recycling or one thing or another. And some of the women I knew sort of pulled back and wouldn't argue with me anymore. And I thought, why not? It's as if you have a little protective coat. So I didn't like that feeling at all. But that eventually left. Um, and Peter, I think, of course, if you are the writer, it's great. I mean, he was so thrilled, and he was so challenged to then be asked to write the screenplay. Uh, and and once we got onto Martha's Vineyard and he was working on the screenplay, he realized very quickly that what he wanted to do was go off and write another novel. And so he was thrilled when Carl Gottlieb came in and took over the day-to-day
Mm,
writing of script and changes and all, because that's a completely different talent,
yeah.
um, than what Peter had. Yeah.
Can you see my questions because you're preempting everything I'm asking? Because my next question was obviously, whether being a writer, you have a phenomenal hit, like an unfathomable sized hit like Jaws. Um, and then obviously there's the pressure potentially of the follow up. What do you do next? Because again, the old saying goes, you're only as good as your last performance, or your last book, or whatever it is that your discipline is. Um, so now you had this monster hit with Jaws, pardon the pun. You've had this monster hit with Jaws, and now you're sort of setting out to write the next book or the next project. What was there a certain amount of pressure? Did it feel different, or did it alleviate the pressure in some way? What was that like?
I know that Peter felt um, he felt some pressure for the next book, but he did have a great idea because we had been doing a lot of diving in Bermuda.
Mm,
And so we knew about the wrecks around Bermuda, and we knew that there were three wrecks that had gone down on top of each other. So that gave him just a wonderful germ of an idea to create another book around.
mm,
So I think he just so enjoyed writing that he was anxious to get back and do that again. And it's a lonely job writing. He was up on the third floor, and he would just stay there most of the morning, and then in the afternoon he'd try to get some tennis in or something to release tension. But I think he just so enjoyed writing that was what he was going to do. And then I remember there was actually a recent article in the New Yorker by John McPhee, and Peter and John McPhee used to have lunch together a lot. Uh, and John said in this article that they had talked about, would you stop writing? I mean, he said to Peter, would you like to stop writing? You've got enough money to live. You don't have to make money. And Peter said, I've thought of it because I love going out on the ocean on expeditions and diving and bringing up wrecks with Teddy Tucker in Bermuda. But I love writing so much
Mm.
that I'm just going to continue. So he did. So he had that balance in life where he would be home writing another book, and yet he'd be out on the ocean. And I went with him on lots of expeditions. So, and the kids did too. So we were really thrilled and privileged, really, to be out on those expeditions with great scientists and fascinating videographers and people. It was it was wonderful.
You're making me jealous because
I
I
know.
I think one of the things that is interesting. I mean, I'm 44 and I saw Jaws probably a little bit too young, but
Uh-huh.
it was my first experience of the ocean, and I'm in love with the ocean and I'm in love with sharks and everything that the ocean kind of has to offer. And I try to dive as much as I can and see as much of it as I can. And I think, to your point about, because one of the things I think people are kind of taught is, or particularly writers, I guess, is write about what you know. And Peter knows about the ocean, and he gave the gift of his knowledge and his experiences of the ocean through his books. So I think for him to stop writing would actually been a disservice to the people that have kind of along this journey of that he's
Uh-huh.
kind of set in motion. So I'm glad that he didn't. I'm glad he didn't stop writing, and I'm glad he continued.
Well, that's a very nice way to look at it. I hadn't No one's ever said it quite that way before. But yes, all of his books did give insight into the ocean and gave people experiences in and around the ocean that most people can't have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of people that will probably share that view. And if it didn't, because there are a lot of people who maybe have never been to the ocean before or experienced the ocean. So we might watch a YouTube video, but before the internet and video media, it was books. That's how we would learn. So I think
Yeah.
Peter played a massive part in that eye opening into what the actual ocean is. And then yeah.
Well,
So
and also, I mean, honestly, when you look at the effect of Jaws, I know there have been many, many articles written about this, but people were frightened. I mean, I was frightened. I didn't want to dive for about a year, but then I quickly, got back into my scuba diving. But the result of Jaws was excitement about the ocean and sharks, and so it really had a positive effect long term.
mm,
I would say even within the first 5 or 10 years, it had a positive effect. Peter got just thousands of letters from people all over the world saying how fascinated they were in sharks, that they were using the book as a teaching tool in school, that they so many young people wrote and said they wanted to be Hooper, they wanted
yeah,
to be a marine biologist. He was just absolutely the hero for them. That was their ideal job when
yeah,
they realized they could get out on the ocean and have some adventure, and they didn't have to stay in a lab someplace.
yeah.
So so that opening up of the excitement of the ocean, I think, was a very real good benefit of Jaws.
Think it's part of the everyday longevity of the legacy as well. Because I was one of those kids that
Oh, yeah.
I didn't ever write to Peter, but I was fascinated by sharks, the ocean, and it was through that character Hooper and just the setting of the whole story. So we've got a lot to thank Peter for, and hopefully because there are a lot of shark experts that have been inspired by Jaws that have pursued a career,
Mhm.
or sort of writers because of Jaws, or filmmakers, or whoever. So Jaws is touching quite a lot of, or inspiring quite a lot of people in multiple disciplines. They're just picking what they connect with Jaws and then running with it into that future, into that career, or whatever it is. In terms of the book itself, now obviously, as we know, it's been out for 50 years this month, which again is just incredible to think about. But it's also been republished in multiple different versions. You've got I've got probably about 8 different versions of the book itself. Um, do you have a particular favorite version of the physical book?
I'm laughing because um, the first cover that was made was so grotesque that the salesman in the bookstores said to Tom Congdon and Doubleday, "No, no, no, we cannot sell this book. I mean, we love the book, but we cannot sell it." And then, the first Jaws cover was just dark, nothing.
This
Then,
this one that you're
no,
talking about?
it had nothing at all.
Oh, nothing.
No. And then they put the shark and the girl in. So it went through a few renditions, but that's the one I like the best, the classic one that you just held up.
I like that. I think it's nice and simple. Although someone did comment that the shark looks like a penis with teeth. However,
Yeah.
that
Oh,
is
yes. Oh, yes. That's always the remark.
now, like most Jaws fans, we'll have a sense of Peter through his books, through interview clips, and maybe those that have been fortunate enough to meet him. But what can you tell us about Peter the man?
Oh, my, my, my. Well, he was just fascinating. Um, Warm, really warm, loving, wonderful guy, very athletic. He played great tennis, and gosh, he just loved Tracy and Clay, his kids, and loved doing things with them, teaching them how to scuba dive. So he was very involved in the family because, of course, he was with us all day long. He wasn't a dad who left the house and went some other place. So we were all together as a family um, many, 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 many days. And then we were lucky enough as a family to go on trips, which are, that's a great privilege for a family to go off and have an adventure together where there's a little danger and there's some excitement and you all support each other. And then there are these fascinating people around you, other divers and videographers and scientists. So it was a very stimulating life for them. But of course, they did have to go to school. So I think they would have gladly not gone to school and just carried on with Peter on trips. So, but he was also quite a shy man. He was not a big personality that way. Um, and we mostly had small parties at home because we enjoyed just meeting people in depth. I think that was more his way. But he was funny too. My gosh, he was funny. Very witty, witty guy. I have just a box full of racy poems he's made and cartoons that he and friends would, send back and forth, and poems he created. So I sort of am trying to think of how I'm going to use those or how I show them. Um, but he was very funny and witty, and so his mail was always full of that kind of thing, back and forth with Jeff Brown and Jim Boylan and I don't know, Sheldon Sturgis and lots of friends all over the world.
Yeah.
So funny guy. And you know that his first rendition of Jaws, he had a lot of humor in it. And then Tom Congdon said, I think you just have to go for the straight drama and not have the humor. Yeah.
Mm, that's
So
interesting.
if you go to any of his other books or say Rummies, that it's very funny. So
Mm.
if anybody wants to read a Peter Benchley that is witty and funny and just can make you laugh out loud, he's got a couple of those that he wrote later on.
It's so funny that you say that because I'm sure you've heard this before, but one of the big things about the book, in terms of the difference between the book and the movie, is the characters and how unlikable they appear to be in the book, whereas they're actually very likable in the movie, and that's partly obviously because of the foundation of Peter's screenplay, but also then what Carl Gottlieb did in terms of just bringing a
Mhm.
slightly lighter edge to these characters and making them likable, so we care about them more. I mean, Spielberg, I think, is quoted as saying that he was rooting for the shark in the book, which I think is really funny. But but it's interesting that Peter was directed to take the humor out. It sold really well, became this massive hit, but then actually became an even, say, arguably bigger hit because of the movie, and the humor was injected back in. That
Yeah,
that's that's
interesting.
that's very strange, very strange.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Talking about the movie, what do you think about the film? Or what your, obviously, because you've been through it, sort of through the whole journey of Jaws. You're not someone that's just watched it. You've been there from the inception of the story, release of the book, the making of the movie, and everything else. But what do you think of the film? Or where does it kind of sit with you?
Oh, of course, the film is absolutely brilliant, and Peter thought it was brilliant also. He did have some suggestions early on, to Stephen, saying that he absolutely disagreed with the rogue shark theory. I don't wanna get into too much detail, but the rogue shark theory was that if an animal bit a human, they had the taste of human flesh, and they would therefore hang around for human flesh. Peter really did not write the book that way. It was it was the shark's world. He was in the ocean, and sharks are born and eat and die. And all animals are born, they eat, they die. So he was approaching the shark as a very legitimate animal, and not saying that it was somehow this weird creature that had gotten a bit of human flesh and wanted to go back for more. So, so in any case, the 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 movie now wait, are you asking me to really get into the movie, or where
You
were we
take it.
with
You can take it wherever you like. The question. That's why I asked it that way. It's like, where does the movie kind of sit with you? What do you think of the film? You can take that answer anywhere you wish.
okay. So, of course, well, first of all, the movie is absolutely brilliant, the way it was done, and so we did have a viewing in New York, and there were people there who really knew sharks, and they thought the movie was sensational. So that made us all feel um, pretty pretty good about it. And I know we were also with Dreyfus when it was shown on a big movie theater on Broadway, and we came out of the movie, and that was the movie where everybody at the end stood up and is cheering and carrying on. And Dreyfus, he can be so funny, and he came out onto the sidewalk with Peter and me, and he's jumping up and down, jumping up and down. We did it, because he had been really worried about this movie when they were filming it. And I'm sure you know the story about Stephen seeing the movie first in I think it was a theater in Texas, and he realized that he didn't have anything scary in after the girl, gets eaten, then there's nothing scary for too long. And he said, you've got to have a screamer every 30 minutes. So that's when they went to Verna Field's swimming pool
Hmm.
and did the gardener, the head coming down into the bottom of the boat, which was definitely a screamer. I mean, everybody would just holler when that happened. So I think the movie was very well put together as a thriller, and the three men, of course, were just brilliant as characters and as actors, and they gave that film the substance that it needed and the fascination, so that you really, really were interested in these three people. Some people say that there was so much character development for these three because the shark wasn't working and they were having so much trouble with it. I don't know. I haven't asked Stephen whether that's true, but I think Stephen, being such a talented director, he intended to have those three men really fascinating and get deep into them to give that interest.
I think you're absolutely right. I think with that, just with the casting of those three actors, I mean, a lot of people find it very difficult to, because we post this on our social media from time to time. It's like, can you show us a film that's been better cast than yours? And that's not just the three leads; that's also the supporting actors as well. Um,
Yes,
but
yes,
it comes
that's
back to, but it always comes back to the characters. And I think when you look at all of the great movies that have been made, the classics, the the reason we come back to it is because of those characters. There's something we connect with. And I'll tell you very briefly my sort of relationship with the movie as I've watched it, as I've gotten older, particularly with those three characters. And I've talked about this before in other interviews. So viewers, you're going to hear this again for the 10th time. I'm sorry, but I'm with Wendy Benchley, so I have to tell. So for me, when you said before about Hooper being, the gateway for a lot of people to get into sharks and the oceans, stuff like that, that was me when I first saw the movie. When I first saw it about 5, 6 years old, I wanted to be Hooper. I wanted to have the denim. I wanted to have the beanie hat. I wanted to be out on the ocean. I wanted to have all of the stuff that Hooper had, all the toys, and also get to study sharks. And again, it opened up that world to me. But then as I got older and as we developed, I got sort of a little bit more connected to Quint, because obviously Quint has got a lot of scars and trauma that he's carrying underneath the surface that we only find out about literally a few hours before he meets his fate. And as you grow older, that happens. You go through things and you start to collect those scars and those experiences, and they start to shape you who you are. But you always have a choice in terms of how you react to those in a positive way, negative way, or whatever. And then later in life, I don't have children of my own, but I've got two amazing goddaughters. One is just turned 3, the other one is going to be 8 this year. And when I started to watch Jaws again, I started to watch it almost as a parent. So the scene with Alex Kintner is it's not just a spectacular set piece, but it really hits you as a parent, because at the end, when you have Lee Fierro, Mrs. Kintner, come along to the beach at the end, and she's screaming at Alex, it's like, I know exactly how that feels. I know exactly how that feels. But the only difference is I didn't lose my child in a shopping centre. Her child is not coming back. So then when you have that scene on the dock with Mrs. Kintner and Chief Brody, and she slaps him, it's like, you're kind of on her side massively, but you're also on Brody's side, because you understand why those decisions have been made and why Alex has been killed. So there's a real sense of parental duty there, and I think you kind of go. That's been my personal journey with those three characters, and I think you're right in terms of just the casting, the direction, and everything else. Those characters probably would not have been as effective. I think when I talk about Jaws on other podcasts and stuff, I talk about a lot of the right things going wrong in order Jaws to be the movie that it's come out as. Obviously, the foundation and the starting point and the genesis starts with the book. But to get kind of where we are in terms of all these other things that Jaws has produced, it truly is a phenomenon that just keeps giving and giving and giving, which is why when I asked the question, can you believe that we're sitting here 50 years later talking about it? For me personally, I can see people still talking about it in another 50 years' time, long after we've both gone, because this is a film that just keeps giving. I mean, and then it just, as we say, it had a massive impact on the industry as well. It changed Hollywood. It invented the blockbuster and all of those things. But anyway, I mean, as you can see, I'm quite a passionate fan, and I could go on talking about Jaws forever. But let's talk about a little bit more about the making of the film. As you said, you were kind of sort of partially involved. Now, obviously, Peter had a cameo as a reporter. Did you have the chance to cameo, or did you cameo and we just haven't spotted you yet?
I actually, I think, was in one frame with Pete when Peter was doing an interview. Clay and I were in the background, and a wonderful Jaws fan sent me a still of that one little frame, because I thought I'd never made it into the movie, but he took it out and did a print for me. So I do see myself on the beach. But when we first got to the vineyard, we had a car, and there was a call up for Peter to be on the beach. So Peter and I got into the car. I drove him to the beach. We got there and everything had shut down. And it turns out, of course, this was a union shop, and anybody who was an actor was supposed to be driven by a union driver. So, yeah, so I had done bad thing. So Peter went and apologized, and they said fine, and everything went on again. So, so he had, that was just our very little bit, because once Peter was finished with his part on the beach, then we went off to be with family, and Peter started writing another book. So we were not there. I mean, we heard all kinds of stories, but we were not there through the whole filming. That was for everybody else to do. But when you talked about some of your personal experiences, I absolutely agree with you that anyway, the way some of the other characters were done in the book and the movie make it very powerful. But I look back And Pe Peter and I had a really exciting experience early on, right after Jaws was written, and we knew it was going to be a movie, and ABC Sportsman took us to South Australia. And they basically said, "Okay, Benchley, you know, you've written a book about a shark. Wouldn't you like to see one?" And so who could refuse an offer like that? So off we went down to South Australia, dangerous reef with Ron and Valerie Taylor, and Rodney Fox had the boat with the shark cages. And this was early on. I mean, this was very, very new in diving with for sharks. So there was a hunk of horse meat hung over the stern, and it was Australia in the 70s. So I was a woman and banished to the upper deck because women were too weak and I might faint. And and so Peter got into the cage, and this beautiful female white, you know, the females are bigger than the males. So the female came up, opened her mouth to take a bite of the horse, and got the line stuck in between her teeth. She didn't bite through the line, but it got stuck in between her teeth. So she was basically trapped by this line that was connected to the cage and the stern of the boat. And she started to whip around and flip back and forth. She pulled Peter, who was in the cage, under the boat, came back out again. Peter was upside down, back and forth. I was on the top of the boat screaming at the photographers, saying, "Get that rope out of the shark's mouth." And of course, they all were behind their cameras thinking this is great action. And so I came down, elbowed my way through them. And when the shark came up again to get a bite of the horse meat, I grabbed the line and yanked it out of her mouth, and all was well. And she calmed down. Peter stayed in the cage for another half an hour. And then he came up and he said, "What was that ruckus in the beginning?" And all the guys had to say, "Well, Wendy did good job. She's the heroine of the day." And so that was our first encounter with a great white shark. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and you know, we both were just in awe of how beautiful this creature is. They glide through the water so gracefully. When we had our 45th wedding anniversary, Peter said, "What would you like to do?" And I said, "I'd really like to go cage diving with great whites because I'm always the last one to get into the cage. And by the time I get in, the sharks have gone." So we went to Guadalupe off of the California coast. And we went just when all the big whites were coming in. And we just had hours of 4 and 5 beautiful big whites coming by the cage, and you could reach out with your hand and stroke it, and it's very smooth going from head to tail, but from tail to head, you know, it has this tentacles and it's very, very rough. So that was just absolutely thrilling. And there are so many adjectives Peter uses and everybody use for great whites because they're so graceful and they don't wiggle a lot when they swim. They just cruise by, and you see just a slight little flip of their tail. Of course,
Yes.
when they're really going fast, then you see a lot more action. But the muscles are just anyway. They're gorgeous creatures.
Yeah, they are, and again, it's because for me, whenever I speak to Jaws fans and shark experts, and basically anybody that will listen, it's there's always sort of two camps when it comes to sharks, and some of this can be traced back to Jaws. I think sometimes it's just a media perception problem,
Yeah.
but there seem to be fear and fascination.
Hmm.
And I think from what I noticed, because Jaws was re-released in the cinema, I think it was 2 years ago in IMAX and 3D, and the 3D transfer was actually really good, and the IMAX was breathtaking to see. Some of the cinematography was incredible. Um, and what I found interesting was there were parents bringing their kids to the cinemas to
Yeah.
see the movie
Yeah.
for the first time, and it played exactly the same way. as it did probably back in 1975. The kids were screaming in the right place, they were laughing in the right place, they were exhilarated by the ending and all this kind of stuff. And in my mind, I thought there's probably a really good chance that those kids are now going to go back and look at sharks. Whereas
Mhm.
it seems to be older people, say adults, who actually quite afraid of Jaws, or sorry, of sharks if they see Jaws for the first time after a certain age. So I guess my question is how do we flip fear into fascination about sharks? How do we flip that switch?
Yeah. Well, I think that switch has been flipping over the last 20 years.
Mm.
So nowadays, as you say, young children are taken to see Jaws because they're fascinated to begin with. So yes, they get the thrill and they scream, but they're really interested. And one good example of what a different age it is now with sharks is on the Cape of Cape Cod, of Massachusetts. And the about 6 years ago, there was a bite of a man because the seals have been protected along the east coast of the United States. And because there are more seals now, we have more great white sharks all up and down the east coast, but especially around the Cape Cod and some Nantucket and a little bit Martha's Vineyard, but not that much. So when this person, this father, was bitten, he had been swimming quite far out with his son, and a shark came up, bit him. He was lucky; they got back to shore. He survived, and his reaction was, "Ah, if I had known that he just didn't know there were a lot of great whites because of the seals. And he said, it's their ocean. I should have been more careful in my swimming and not gone way, way out into the middle of the seals. Of course, I might get bitten. And when other people on the Cape realized that there were really a lot more great whites there, they started a new NGO called the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, and
Oh,
it's an education program. Kids come to learn, adults come to learn. They have shark watching tours now that go out. So there's much more understanding of this is their ocean. We're intruders in their ocean, and we need to protect it because we need a healthy ocean.
mm,
And without sharks, we're not going to have a healthy ocean. So that's been a sea change, if I may
yeah,
say, and a
yeah.
wonderful one.
I,
Yeah.
I think I think sorry, I was just going to say because one of the people that I follow is Dr. Sylvia Earle, and she put
Oh
it
yeah.
brilliantly in terms of the relationship between the ocean and the land, man and animals, and she just basically said no blue, no green. It's that
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah.
And I think that there are so many things, not just around sharks, but the oceans in general. There are so many things, whether it's pollution, fishing, our intrusion, if you like, in terms of just being present in the ocean changes our relationship with that environment totally. I mean, in terms of um, say specifically shark conservation, but keeping ocean conservation in mind in the broader sense, there are so many different ways that people seem to be trying to work with these animals in certain ways. So some are just observing them, they're just trying to monitor them and just get a feel for what they're doing and how they live and what their risks are. Some things are really easily identifiable because we're finding sharks filled with fishing nets in their guts or other animals or whatever, so we know that's an impact. But then we also see conservationists who get into the environment, say with a great white shark with no cages, and they will swim alongside the animals. They will reach out and touch them. And there are other people who will put electronic tags directly onto the fins, which not on every occasion, but on some occasions can damage the animal in terms of their fin. So there seems to be a real spectrum in terms of how we should be trying to study the animals and protect them. Where do you kind of where do you kind of sit on that spectrum in terms of just all of the options available? What do you think is the right way for us to try and interact and safeguard these animals?
Yeah. Well, I certainly think that the research vessels that are tagging sharks are doing, I think that is excellent and good work and should happen. I'm sure sometimes it does maybe damage a fin a little bit, but if you watch the GPS maps, these sharks are surviving after tagging for years and years. So I think all of that has helped us see where they are, see how the populations are doing, and has helped interest governments and states and citizens to protect them. So real the real gruesome horror is shark finning for shark fin soup. That is what that is the process that has really decimated the shark population. For many, many, many years, 100 million sharks were killed mainly for shark fin soup. So if you look at that, 100 million every year for 10, 20 years at least, it's been absolutely devastating. So I've worked with this group called Wild Aid, and they have worked on anti-shark finning campaigns. Actually, Peter and I, early on, in around 2000, went with Pete Knights, who was the founder of Wild Aid, to Asian countries, to Taiwan and other countries. We were supposed to travel with Jackie Chan because Jackie Chan was gonna talking about shark fins, and that it killed the shark. When you have a shark fin soup, that fin came off of a live animal, and that animal died.
Yeah.
So Peter and I were always paired with one Chinese opera star or another, or TV star, really. And that campaign with Jackie Chan, Yao Ming, Maggie Q, and many other Chinese icons really made a very big difference in China, and the demand for shark fin soup went down 85%. The Chinese government stopped serving shark fin soup. The airlines, the hotels, families didn't have it anymore for weddings. So it was a very, very good effort. And then, of course, the other way to help sharks is to have marine protected areas and more of those across the ocean. And there are many governments and environmental groups that are creating these. And we hope to get 30% of the ocean into protected areas by 2030. So we're making some nice headway there. And Wild Aid also has a superb program to make sure that the marine protected areas that have been created by a government or a local town, to make sure that they're actually protected, that they actually have the money and the local support and the boats and all of that to keep it protected. And you know that marine protected areas are working, because if you look at a Google map, you will see all of these fishing boats lined up around the outside border of marine protected areas, because the fish get bigger, and then when they swim out, they're a nicer catch. So if we
Yeah.
can get enough of those areas, we could still feed the world and keep the ocean going.
Mhm. Now, the Daily Jaws, we have a following of just over 300,000 people on social media, which is insane. And we had over 1 million visitors to our website last
Hmm.
year. So that's basically an army that we can mobilize, because a big majority of those people love
Yeah,
sharks because of
yeah.
Jaws. So what can we do to mobilize our followers, our audience, and just say this is one difference or two or three differences or actions you can take to make a positive effect on sharks, our oceans, our environment?
Oh, of course, I think that volunteering with any kind of local group that you have around you is really important, whether it's a beach cleanup, that helps the ocean too, giving money to local groups, or if they want to get on to Wild Aid or Beneath the Sea on their websites and just send us a little bit of money whenever you can, then you're helping the professionals who are out there and who are really making programs that will have a real impact. You know, I think sometimes we all want to be deeply involved with a hands-on feeling that we're really doing something personal. So I urge people to, yes, do your hands-on if it's a beach cleanup or helping a go out to tag a shark if you're lucky enough to do that. But I also urge people to think about that when you give $10 or 50 or $100 to the professionals who are out there making programs that make a difference, that's participation that's very, very important. So anybody who wants to get on and go to wildaid.org, it's WILDAID.org, or beneaththewaves.org. That would be great. Thank
Wonderful.
you for letting me say that.
No, no, absolutely. This is a big part of the Jaws legacy that I think is sometimes overlooked or forgotten about, because whenever we see reports about sharks in the newspapers, particularly here in the UK, because we have such a terrible tabloid culture here, it's
Yeah.
always sensationalized and negative and things like that, which is why one of the things that we do with our stuff, because we do have a dedicated area on our website about sharks, we always try to use the phrases shark encounter, because
Yes.
that's more accurate, we feel. But again, it's all about everything that we've talked about comes back to Peter and that idea that he had over 50 years ago to write a book about a fish that wouldn't go away.
Yeah.
That for
Yeah.
me, that's an incredible story just in itself. Um, Now, Wendy, it's normally customary for me to leave the last word with the guest before I sign off. So, would love for you just to share a message of hope, love, whatever it is you want to do before we wrap things up.
Oh, thank you, Russ. Well, honestly, I just want to thank all of the Jaws fans, because I think all of your interest in everything you do keeps keeps sharks and shark conservation um, in the public eye. And so as we come up to the 50th, there'll be more activity, and I'll probably be doing more interviews. And so it's great to have the Jaws fans out there really moving along. And so everything you do, thank you. And anything more you can do, just let me know if I can help. So I thank you, and thank you for asking me for this interview. I'm really thrilled. And I didn't know that it was February when it was published. So you're keeping me informed.
We're here to serve. And for some reason, my Zoom background has suddenly just gone off with fireworks. I don't quite know why, but we'll leave that in the edit because it looked pretty cool.
It looked great.
And obviously, thank you for accepting our invitation to talk. It's been because we've been doing this now for quite a while, and we appreciate how busy just everybody kind of is. But you're one of the key people that we want to talk to. You know, you're the closest that we can get to Peter. You know, the person that started this whole phenomenon. And the legacy of the work that you and Peter have done, you know, not just since Peter's passing that you've sort of spearheaded, but also, you know, the Benchley Ocean Awards and everything before that. You know, it was just incredible, and it's really inspiring to see just how you picked up the gauntlet and really turned something that could have been quite negative into something actually really positive and hopeful. And I think we are getting we're getting toward the right place, like you say. Things are being changed, perception is being changed, actions being taken, but there are still consistent actions that people, everyday people, land lovers like me, that we just need to take, and it will make a massive difference. And you know, you're one of those inspirational people that's the face and the heart and the drive of some of those efforts. So for me, on behalf of myself, my team, and also the Jaws fans that are watching, thank you for taking some time out, because we do appreciate how busy you are. But it's been really inspiring for me, and I hope that people watching enjoy it.
Thank you very much. That's very nice of you. And I love my conservation work, because I know how important it is to keep the ocean healthy and to keep those gorgeous sharks swimming in proliferation around the ocean. Thank you.
Well, long may they live and swim.
Yeah.
Guys, I've been Ross for the Daily Jaws, speaking with Wendy Benchley, sorry, wife of Jaws author Peter Benchley and shark conservationist, for the 50th anniversary since the release of Peter's incredible book, Jaws. So until next time, I'll bid you farewell and adieu.